This is the Holzminden POW Camp. Notorious for its cruel conditions, it was supposed to be escape-proof. But on the 23rd of July 1918, the unthinkable happened. That night, 29 British officers vanished, crawling through a hand-dug tunnel beneath the feet of their guards. Against all the odds, 10 of them made it back to Britain. So how on earth did they manage this seemingly impossible feat? Well, in this video, filmed behind the scenes at IWM London, we'll tell the amazing story of the greatest escape of the First World War, featuring the real objects and stories of the people who were there.
Opened in autumn 1917, at first sight Holzminden appeared to be a well-constructed, comparatively comfortable camp set in pleasant surroundings. It was built originally as barracks in 1913, located on the edge of the small town of Holzminden in Lower Saxony. Yet what always set the tone of the camp was the commandant, and Holzminden was ruled with a rod of iron by Karl Niemeyer, hated by both the prisoners and his own German staff alike. Known as Milwaukee Bill because he had lived in the USA, he prided himself on his English language skills. On one occasion, in a typical rage, he shouted, "You think I know nothing, but I know damn all." He vowed to make his camp escape-proof.
Holzminden wasn't just any prisoner of war camp. It was reserved for the most troublesome British officers, the ones who never stopped trying to escape. The First World War's answer to Colditz. But they weren't the only inhabitants. All officer camps also contained other ranks who worked as orderlies. Their job was to look after the officers, and there were around 100 of them at Holzminden. This was a prized role, far better than the alternative of forced labour in coal or salt mines that other privates were forced to endure. Still, life on the inside was harsh. So harsh, in fact, that the prisoners nicknamed the camp Hellminden. Their humour was matched by their determination to break free.
Sport was particularly valued by those who were determined to escape, as it was a way of maintaining the fitness that would be vital to walk from Holzminden to neutral Holland, over 150 miles. This football was presented to Major Jack Shaw in November 1918. An inveterate escaper, he was also secretary of the camp football competitions. And what makes it really special is the fact that it has the signatures of prisoners who were there, where they've actually signed their own names. And we can also see the name Gamage's here, very faintly. This was from Gamage's department store in London, and it was typical of the footballs that were sent into camps by organisations like the YMCA.
From the moment they arrived at the camp, the prisoners were looking for a place to dig a tunnel. This had to be both easily accessible to the tunnellers and also completely undetectable by the guards. Now, the prisoners were housed in two barrack blocks known as Caserne A and Caserne B. The latter was shared with the orderlies, and it was here that they smelt an opportunity. The space underneath the stairs beneath the orderlies' entrance was the perfect place for a tunnel. However, this section of the building was entirely partitioned off, with officers strictly banned. The only way in was to disguise themselves as orderlies. This was extremely risky. Being caught would almost certainly lead to a search and the discovery of the tunnel. But with no alternative, they began to dig.
Parties of 3 men would work on a shift on rotation, with the first man crawling into the tunnel and digging with cutlery, spoons and knives, or other homemade implements. The spoil would be put into an enamel basin attached to a string that would be pulled underneath him by the second man, while the third man in the vestibule to the tunnel would dispose of it in homemade sacks made from mattress covers, old shirts and other textiles. The work was hard and dangerous, and a full assault on the senses. It was pitch black in the tunnel. Access was by slow wiggling, like a snake, with a musty, foul air smell, incorporating mice, sweat, fear and a legacy headache, and having to endure the horror of the gleam of a rat's eyes suddenly appearing as the disturbed rodents ran next to your body.
The tunnellers were aiming for a nearby rye field, but after months of digging, they had no idea how far they'd actually gotten. In June 1918, they tested their progress, poking a white flag out of the earth on a stick, but they were still 8 yards short of their goal. Then, more bad news. New camp rules were introduced which banned games and exercise and doubled the number of daily roll calls from 2 to 4. The pressure was on and time was running out. Meanwhile, the men began to prepare for what they would do once they were beyond the wire. For this, they appealed for help from Britain.
By 1917, the British had figured out how to smuggle escape aids into prisoner of war camps. It was possible for prisoners to communicate with Britain by the use of coded letters, and many Holzminden prisoners gave miniature documents to prisoners being exchanged to neutral Holland for them to forward to family and friends in the UK. This example, written by Lieutenant James Bennett of the Royal Naval Air Service, shows what one of these minuscule missives looks like. Tiny handwriting is accompanied in this example by a primitive drawing of a cake depicting how best to hide contraband and where the Germans were likely to insert a knife to look for hidden material.
These escape aids would be sent into the camp by post, hidden in ordinary objects. Jack Shaw was sent a timetable for trains from Holzminden to Aachen, hidden in a shaving brush. He also received a large tin of tongue with the meat extracted and replaced with maps, compasses and wire cutters. However, neither arrived in time for the breakout. After 9 long months of digging, the tunnel was finally ready, and on the night of the 23rd of July, the Great Escape from Holzminden began.
13 men who had been the tunnelling working party were guaranteed places and had drawn lots for the order in which they would leave. With Lieutenant Walter Butler the first to get out, he crawled through the tunnel for the last time and began breaking through to the surface around 11 p.m. under the shelter of a row of beams. An orderly was peering out of the window to check Butler was safely out before passing word for the next escaper to set off.
After the original 13 tunnellers had escaped, there was a half-hour gap to give them a well-deserved head start. Next came the most senior officer in the camp, Colonel Rathborne, then 6 men who had offered valuable assistance of a non-digging type. They were finally followed by a further 66 men known as the Ruck, who had the possibility of leaving until day broke.
29 men made it through, but the roof caved in on the 30th. The narrow tunnel, always precarious, had given way under the great activity of the night. So many desperate men crawling through, pushing their escape kit in front of them, had dislodged earth and stones, especially in the last newly uncovered part. A disappointed Jack Shaw was the 31st man.
Now, the 29 escapees had one mission: to get as far from the camp as possible, as quickly as possible. The last 2 men out of the tunnel were first to be recaptured, after a creditable 48 hours of freedom. But Colonel Rathborne made it home in just 5 days. He travelled in the wrong direction to Göttingen and used his German language skills to travel by train to the Netherlands in comfort. Over the following days, more and more men trickled into the neutral Netherlands, free at last.
Captain Edward Wilmer Leggett arrived on the night of the 6th, 7th of August, and IWM has some of the objects that assisted in his escape, such as the Panama hat he wore. Leggett believed that the hat was the most important part of the disguise, and that was because you could see it from a distance. And looking respectable was important. If you were dishevelled, you were instantly a suspicious person. And these moccasins are amazing. It's intriguing to think of him sitting in the prisoner of war camp sewing these and thinking about how he was going to use them when he was outside the camp. These were designed to enable him to travel silently at night, especially when close to the border, bringing them safely back to Britain, and now they are preserved here at the Imperial War Museum.
In total, a record 10 men made it back to Britain. An extraordinary feat which immediately captured the public imagination. It was covered extensively in the press at the time, and in 1938 a film was released entitled Who Goes Next? The men involved felt a close connection and enjoyed a regular reunion dinner which continued for many years, with James Bennett the last surviving escaper.
Here we have a lovely invitation to the 20th anniversary dinner. So here we can see we have this sort of caricature of Niemeyer and the German Achtung. And then we have 2 little silhouettes of rather furtive escapers here. And here we have the menu card for the dinner. And if we open it up, we can see the menu, what they actually ate at the meal. The vegetable they have is French beans. Now, is that a reference to the bean field that they came up in? Together with signatures of many of those who attended. So we've got Bennett's signature, Rathborne, Walter Butler's signature. Many of the Holzminden escapers were employed by MI9 in the Second World War to give talks on their experiences and provide escape and evasion awareness. By 1940, Britain had an efficient organisation that fostered escape-mindedness, but it owed its origins to the First World War and the Tunnellers of Holzminden.